Today's event is a very big milestone for us, philea, Philanthropy Europe Association, and Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. After more than 1 year of extensive research, interviews, community consultations, sense-making, think lab sessions,
And
Alina, I think you've muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Here we are launching our vision for Futures Philanthropy. And our publication brings together two critical disciplines of futures thinking and philanthropy. And it looks at how philanthropy can apply foresight to live up to its potential of being forward-looking, long-term, risk-taking, and innovative. How it can seed hopeful futures, all the while catalyzing anticipation for the common good. We are going to have 1 hour together today, and it will be my pleasure to guide you through. We will hear from our inspiring leaders, Delphine Morales and Daria Krivanos, and then my dear colleagues, Niklas Larsson and Hanna Stelle, will present Futures Philanthropy publication. We'll also hear from some of the community members who will share their vision for Futures Philanthropy, and then there will be an open invitation for all of you to stay for additional 30 minutes to go deeper and to have a discussion together. And before we kick it off, we wanted to invite you to warm up and to play a game. So it is the polar game, which actually an appetizer of the Futures Philanthropy publication, because you will be able to find it in the publication. But there are two questions that we wanted to invite you to reflect upon. In the next 10 years, do you see the world as getting better or worse? And then do you think that you have the agency to act upon it? We are inviting you to go to the Mentimeter. So here is the QR code. You can also share, you can also access it through the website, menti.com, and enter the code. And once you're there, we see that people are connecting. You can press this thumbs up. Okay. So maybe we can now go into the first slide. We hope you have managed to go into the menti.com. So here are the two questions for you to reflect upon. And if we go to the next slide now, you will see that while reflecting upon whether you think that the world will be getting better or worse, there is this vertical axis. You'll see that the future is bright or the future is bleak, so you can position yourself moving along this vertical axis. And then going further, whether you think that you can actually make a difference or it is beyond and you cannot make any difference, you can move along the horizontal axis. So if you can pin yourself, it will allow us to see those individual views of the future that we are bringing. Let's give it maybe some 10 seconds more. And let's see.
Hi.
Okay, that's very interesting. So you can see here where the individual views of other participants are. So we can see quite a concentration of dots in this quadrant where we would assume that the future is bleak, but quite many of you think that we can actually make a difference. Then we have more dots of those who think that the future is bright, but they actually can make a difference. And then some of you who think that the future is bleak, they cannot do anything about it. And nobody thinks that the future is bright, and then you cannot act upon it. And before we think of it further, we wanted to invite you to share with us. Why have you pinned yourself there? What was the reason why you said that the world would be getting worse or getting better, and why you are sharing with us whether you can personally affect this or you cannot? We can see some responses already popping up. The rise of populism and non-democratic feelings across Europe. This is a reflection on why the future seems bleak. Philanthropy can play a role in the world falling apart. Then lots of systemic issues. Hope beats fear. Thinking you can't affect change means you won't. Negative mega trends. Intentional hope and social imagination are fundamental today. I have moments of despair and moments of hope. And although things are bad, we can all do something. And a lot of little things add up. The world appears more bleak than ever before in my lifetime. The climate crisis is accelerating much faster than we thought. We have more people paying attention and participating in the conversation about the path of the future. We can work together to make it better. Collaboration for the win. We have more coming. We would like to thank you so much for sharing your perceptions. And this is a very important exercise for us to actually reveal some of the assumptions about the future, about the images of the future that we bring. And it is really an inclusive way for us to establish this discourse about futures. And this is very much what we are pursuing with the Futures Philanthropy initiative, and now with this milestone of the Futures Philanthropy publication that we are launching today. And with this, it is my big honor to introduce the Chief Executive Officer at Philanthropy Europe Association, philea, Delphine Morales, who will speak about the vision for Futures Philanthropy. Delphine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alina. And thank you to everyone for joining us today for the launch of a publication which has been crafted, carried, and cared for by so many in this virtual room with us today. I was really inspired to see the words of hope beats fear and collaboration for the win in what you've just shared as participants on the board. And I think this resonates really with the thinking that we have within philea around this publication. So it's really a joy for us to celebrate the combination of hard work with you. It's the combination of a vision that the future is not singular, that it is not predetermined, and that it depends on those who create it. Albert Camus once said that real generosity towards the future consists in giving all to what is present. And at philea, we choose to believe that the future can take as many shapes and forms as the people willing to define it. Whether we think the world will be better or not, whether we think we have agency or not, the future depends on the investment and choices that are made now and the realities it allows to emerge from it. And philanthropy has a responsibility in this. As a sector, we have the ability and the privilege to embrace longer-term horizons if we want to, and to apply future lenses to our work. And while we're all deeply conscious of the many challenges compounding into complex crises that we see every day. And while many of us wake up day after day with a sense of urgency that you've shared also in the previous exercise, we also know that our generation may be the first generation to really understand that we can do things differently and that our actions can lead to a radically different future. So with that, philanthropy's unique ability to deliver on the long term requires a fertile soil of futures literacy, of anticipation and imagination, and that is what today is about. So if the launch of our publication today is the culmination of months of hard work, it is at least as much, and perhaps even more, not only today, but every day and every day again, a new beginning. Today is one of many invitations to use foresight and futures thinking in our philanthropic practice, to challenge and inspire each other, to learn from peers, and to explore the possibility of futures philanthropy to lead to transformative change. With our new publication, we wish to continue a journey of exploration with you on how and why philanthropy could play a role in fostering anticipation for the common good, and what anticipation looks like when it is put in the service of just, resilient, and pluralistic societies that center people and planets. So with that, I would like to end by thanking a lot of people, so bear with me because it's a long list. The publication is really the result of work of a community of people. And I'd like to thank the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies for the great partnership we've had with them. In particular, Niklas Larsson for driving this part together with us with dedication and care. Thank you also to David Hesse from the Mercator Stiftung Switzerland, Joe Elborn from the Evans Foundation for being with us every step of the way. Thank you to Barry Knight for your tremendous help in the analysis of our survey. Thank you to Lizzie Elbrecht from the Adessim Foundation for being an invisible strategic force behind the publication. Thank you to Silke Bremeyer from the Robert Bosch Foundation, Markus Hiep and Miriam Stegmaier from the Together Foundation, Alina Porum from Inspire, Andres Lisco from Porticus, Alberto Anfosti from Compagnia di San Paolo, Dea Vidovic from Cultura Nova, Kathy Hartley and Stephanie van Drunen Lidl from Laudes. Thank you also to Pierre-Olivier Bigot from OSF for helping us make sense of the findings and discussing pathways for the future of the analysis. Thank you for the 238 people who responded to our survey. Thank you to the 40 people who agreed to be interviewed by us. Thank you to those who contributed to the publication through case studies, and that included Luis Xavier from the Gulbenkian Foundation, Carola Carazone and Francesca Meretta from Acifero, David Hesse from Mercator Foundation Switzerland, and last but not least, allow me to also thank from the heart the colleagues from the team at Philea who always go over and beyond to make things happen, and that includes in particular Angela Pauli, Marianne Johnston, John Warren, Joshua Redding, Barbara Ortega, Alina Schenfeld, and Hannah Stehle. With that, and together with my team, I really look forward to what is ahead and this ambitious endeavor and journey that we have with you, and that is today only beginning. Thank you. And over to you, Daria.
Thank you very much. I think, well, from our end, I would also just spend a few minutes reflecting a little bit on the report and why we engaged in this and why we think it's important. Well, first of all, I think the vision and the mission for the Institute through the last 55 years is very aligned with Philea, which means we're here to create a better society in the future in whatever ways we can. And in this particular instance, we were able to do that by supporting this process with everything we know from methodology and our experience and every tool we possess. So I think it's great to see put to work. But I also think, I know it sounds a little bit like a cliche, but I think the time is now. So as much as I was in the upper right corner of the quadrants, I do believe we can do something. I also believe the future is better, but I base that on historical evidence saying the future has always in the long term been better than the past, at least by most standards. But the problem is also that when I look back, we're coming out of a century where we had these visions. It seemed like people were willing to put themselves on the line and put their decision-making on the line to put in motion something that would not materialize until years or decades later, even beyond their time of influence. those were nation states, those were the peace projects we've seen in particular in Europe, but also the international institutions. And we put something in place beginning or mid last century that would then strengthen throughout the end of it. And then now there's a void. So if we look at the same agents today, they're very occupied for good reasons with short-term risks or managing uncertainty or getting societies through one crisis or the other. That means, at least we at the Institute, we're seeing a void in terms of who will be these stewards for the future in the 21st century. And when we look around, those who were in the 20th are not necessarily present in the same way, not in the debate, and their focus and minds are elsewhere. So we genuinely believe that the philanthropic organizations in a region like Europe could actually take that role and basically take over the baton from those who did it before us. At the same time, we're looking at, for the first time in history, you can say we're looking at a negative narrative. So yes, we had big crises and wars and you name it throughout the 20th century, but we've never painted a bleak picture of the future. It was never something we were looking into. You know, we had the Cold War and we had multiple international escalations, but it was never as if the future would be worse than the past, right? And now suddenly we have a whole generation of people waking up every morning to a narrative where we have a climate crisis, we have a world spinning out of control, we have democracies are failing and the support for democracies is failing and falling because they haven't proven themselves to create better societies. And there are many reasons for these emotions. Some of them are simple overexposure to a certain, I guess, subgroup effects. But there's also, I believe it rests with those of us who actually work within these fields to create a better picture. And again, I think it requires long-term thinking. It requires creativity, but it also requires a lot of courage. And it is about putting in motion things that we may not, those of us around these tables may not see them come to bear, or we may not be here to see them through, but someone else will. But it's about daring to do that. And I really think that the philanthropic foundations and the philanthropic society, in particular in a region like Europe, should take that role and has that, I'm not going to say responsibility, but it certainly has that unique opportunity to fill that void. So I think coming out of a history where we built a lot of things in the century before this one with agents that are no longer preoccupied with the long term, at least not what we've seen in the last 5 or 10 years, that means there's a need for someone else to do this. And I do think that philea and the members are extremely well positioned for this, because as I started out by saying, I'm in the upper right quadrant because the future has always been better, but that's not the story we tell everyone. So I think the time has come for someone to lean in and embrace the discipline of foresight and use that to explore something that is far more positive, ambitious, and something that would actually make people to look forward to it rather than be anxious about what's coming. So we're very, very happy to co-author this report and to have our name and logo on it, because we genuinely believe that this is something that could pave the way for a new set of actions. So thank you very much for inviting us in.
Thank you so much, Dasher, and thank you for setting this very hopeful scene for our colleagues, which it is my very big pleasure to introduce Hanna Stelle, Head of Foresight and Innovation at philea, and Niklas Larsson, Senior Advisor at Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and UNESCO Co-Chair in Futures Capabilities. Hanna, over to you.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Delphine, and thank you, Dasha, for setting the scene. Indeed, the future seems to be bleak, and we're surrounded by negative narrative. And polycrisis is perhaps one of the terms that was commonly used over the past years. While it transfers the idea of the myriad of challenges that we're facing at the same time, it hides an essential meaning. The word crisis comes from Greek krisis, which means decision. So crisis as a turning point when we have to make a decision. Elementary in a language that I cherish and adore for its wisdom and simplicity. Wei Di, which stands for crisis, consists of 2 characters. Wei, that means crisis, and also Di, or Di Hui, which means opportunity. What foresight and futures thinking helps us uncover a myriad of risks and opportunities, but also different options ahead of us. We have a choice. We only need to make informed decisions. What is the rationale behind the publication? We need to focus on Europe. We need to have a nuanced picture of the philanthropic and civil society context and the trends and megatrends that we observe here. All the material in this publication is original, based on extensive conversations, sense-making, think lab sessions, and iterations with the philanthropic community. We also need foresight, not just as a performative act, but really to inform strategy and to help us inform action. So far, foresight has been dominated by the tech industry, by the corporate sectors. The voice of civil society has been missing in this conversation. And foresight is essentially about a mindset that values evidence and data, fosters experimentation, openness, and humility. We also need to foster collaboration on futures agenda, because many of the issues that we're facing, that philanthropic organizations are facing today, are beyond the scope of what our individual organizations can address, and even what an individual sector can address. And foresight can help us anticipate risks and opportunities, identify trends before they become entrenched, and also understand funding gaps. And finally, we need to foster anticipation for the common good, creating images of the future for the benefit of society. And this is a very important role that philanthropy could play, to use foresight for the benefit of society, not to win the game, not to have a competitive advantage, but really to foster societal transformation. We need futures literacy as a core capability of the 21st century, as UNESCO is advocating, taught in schools, in universities, and really becoming an essential skill in our organizations, in civil society and philanthropy.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you all for the very warm welcome and the very good start here of the launch of our publication. I'm very excited to see so many have logged on here. What you see on this slide here is a high-level overview of the content of the publication, and you can of course choose to read the entire thing from A to Z across its 114 pages, but you could also be invited to dive into different parts that speaks to you, depending on your interest, your needs, your curiosity, as they stand alone as well, and are in their own right. And I'll provide a brief overview to how this publication is broken down into these 4 different parts. The first one we call Foresight and Philanthropy. It provides arguments, know-how, survey results, as well as practical insights and cases, and tools and methods for how to embrace and deploy futures in your own organization. As we have tried to forge a language from the perspective of philanthropy and civic society at large. And the second part moves into Futures of Philanthropy, as it showcases 9 different essays, diverse voices from the dynamic European ecosystem. They're sharing their practices, their learnings, their struggles, questions, and aspirations across very important and relevant topics like systems change, decolonizing philanthropy, what the unintended consequences might be, what philanthropy's commitment to the future is, and much more. The third part is Futures of Europe. This invites us to challenge our assumptions and our mental models in a more speculative way. It acknowledged that the future of Europe will be defined by a lot of different types of change, such as shifting demographics, the state of democracy, media freedom and plurality, new social contracts, well-being metrics, climate change, and of course, emerging technologies. These questions we combine with data and projections, and we have identified pockets of futures that signal hope to kickstart the imagination and challenge conventional thinking by asking a series of what-if questions. All before we arrive at the 4th and final part, the Futures Philanthropy Tools. It closes the publication and brings it home with a few instruments for you to try to transfer what we are talking about here into your own organization. You can do that through a self-reflection tool, and you can do that through the Futures Philanthropy Canvas that help you to consider how Futures Philanthropy practices could look like in your own context and organization. And Hannah will speak to those in just a few minutes. From here, I will briefly introduce you to some of the highlights from the first part of the publication. on foresight and philanthropy, and why our aim has been to develop a shared language by translating foresight into the scope and context of philanthropy and civic society through extensive research, interviews, and a curation of tools that I will get to in a second. Foresight and philanthropy are challenged today to find new purpose and assume new forms with respect to both purpose and legitimacy. And it's our ambition to let them merge and for them to begin to work much more closely together to deliver on these things. Each of the disciplines has access to some of the resources and ways of working and thinking that are very much needed to help us regain control or agency, or to steer us in a more life-affirming direction, to address barriers and seed change. Futures and foresight, as it has developed in the 21st century, has emerged from being very little understood and an underregarded aspect of human capability, underregarded as a discipline in its own right, but is increasingly in present day being seen as a principle in present action to guide decision-making. Philanthropy, on the other hand, is no longer a social or economic sideshow. It has also become a significant and necessary sector, a practice, a culture, an exercise of citizenship. What is needed now is our proposal for these two set of responses to begin to interact, to learn from and support each other, and in some contexts work much more together. That's our ambition with Futures Philanthropy. But we're standing on the shoulders of literature, of course, and we are standing on the shoulders of great thinkers. And I'm paraphrasing Richard Slaughter here, an acclaimed future scholar, who in his book, Foresight and Philanthropy Towards a New Alliance from 2004 already, where he wrote that the reason for this beneficial merger of these two disciplines is that despite having rarely crossed paths in the past, both can be said to largely draw on the same underlying motivation and values. People in foresight and futures and people in philanthropy, they tend to care deeply about a range of issues such as young people, next generations, well-being, the future of our species and its world. The degree of overlap and purpose, of course, varies, but the underlying expression of nearly each version of these mechanisms is the fundamental issue of caring. And perhaps understanding this is what it takes to create these new links and alliances. Both foresight and philanthropy find themselves navigating a world at the brink of unprecedented change, chaos, but also possibility. And it's against this backdrop that we propose foresight and philanthropy to identify new ways of working, alliances together, and approaches as we echo and renew Richard Slaughter's call, as you see here, but in a European context. Anticipation for the common good can sound daunting. We acknowledge that. And that's why we start with small steps and introducing different mindsets that are needed to address the tools that we propose later on. Assessing our mindset can empower the imagination, enhance our ability to prepare, recover, and invent as change occurs. And in the publication, you can look forward to an extensive and pragmatic guide to what we call using the future. It suggests how to adopt a futures mindset as it's presented here. And I'll name a few for you. Practice anticipation and welcome uncertainty. How might we embrace uncertainty as a resource rather than a bug? Shifting from inside out to outside in. How does your work align with emerging global patterns? Are your efforts reactive or are they proactively shaping and responding to societal shifts? Prioritizing the voices of tomorrow. How will decisions made today be judged by those who will inherit the consequences? These are just a few questions meant to warm up the thinking before diving into a more practical set of tools to help scaffold our imagination. Following, we present these tools. Here's only a selection. It's an invitation to apply futures to your own work and organization, and it goes from assessing our relationship with time, with agency, training our imagination, systems thinking tools like the iceberg model you've probably come across several times before, scenario planning, visioning exercises, backcasting, and the 3 Horizons framework. You can see this as a guide that assists you in exploration, in iterations, and to be proactive when you try to reveal your assumptions, explore scenarios, create transition pathways, or plan the next step to take. These tools that we present, they follow a step-by-step approach as presented, but they're also adaptable for deeper analysis in longer projects. They're also handy for sparking discussions in different agendas, in smaller settings, in breakout rooms, conferences, board meetings, or community events even. If we move forward, we can look at the mega trends we identified in the publications. One of the objectives here was that to build a shared understanding of the external environment where philanthropy can act as well. So we conducted the 21st Century Philanthropy Survey, where more than 200 respondents ranked and contributed to megatrends, this megatrend analysis that you see here, that will shape philanthropy's future the next decade. The top 5 megatrends identified to affect philanthropy were including climate change, environmental degradation, AI and automation, concentration of wealth, climate migration, and the rising influence of new governing systems. Understanding the interconnected effects of these potential implications of megatrends is very vital and can spur a lot of inspiration. With the publication, you can evaluate what the interplay of these megatrends is across philanthropy and civic society at large, and consider the influence of this on your strategic priorities, your policy advocacy, your research, where might there be gaps, opportunities for innovation, or even collaboration. If we dive further into the 21st Century Philanthropy Survey, the respondents also identified the biggest risks and opportunities for the next decade. Here, 42%, a staggering 42%, see conservative boards as the biggest, highest internal risk philanthropy is facing the next decade. This is followed by slow adaptation and foundations focusing on mainly mainstream topics, short-termism, risk aversion, power imbalance, restricted funding practices are among the topics respondents raise in their comments on these potential internal risks. On the other hand, the responses also tell us that the most relevant opportunities for the next decade are to adopt systemic approaches, trust-based philanthropy, to focus on breakthrough innovation and integrate futures and foresight, and to work in cross-sector collaborations. And these opportunities, they are key for the future of philanthropy, and the stories of how community members have been seizing these opportunities are featured in the next part of the publication, which Hannah will take.
In the second part of the publication, Futures of Philanthropy, you will find a polyphony of voices of philanthropic leaders, donors, funders networks, next-gen, share examples, where we distill principles that are all embedded in today's philanthropic practice and civil society. We are intentionally speaking of futures of philanthropy in plural, reflecting on the diversity and richness of the European philanthropy landscape and the diverse cultures of giving. There will be multiple pathways and multiple approaches to the future, taking into account your organization's unique legacy, your unique context, and position you hold. We started mapping out emerging practices in the European philanthropy ecosystem that we call pockets of the future. Foresight and futures thinking is becoming an emerging trend. Open Society Foundations has a foresight unit. European Climate Foundation and Mercator Foundation Switzerland have internal foresight positions. Joseph Rancher Foundation has an emerging futures program that is focusing not only on what they call urgent needs, but also on urgent deep needs, the long view. Here you can see that it's not only about applying foresight, but it's actually much broader and much more ambitious. It's about innovation, it's about working with communities, it's about systems change approaches. You will see examples of community foundations, such as Messina Foundation in Sicily, Italy, Truck Foundation in Serbia, Mosaic Foundation in Bosnia and Herzegovina that innovate, that work closely with the communities, that know the local context well. You will also find examples of established philanthropic organizations that embarked on systemic approaches, such as Fondation de France, Bikuben Foundation. Robert Bosch Foundation has created new funding instruments that support actors and ideas, not only fully pledged and fully planned projects. Novo Nordisk Foundation supports science and innovation and invests in quantum computing. So does Companhia de São Paulo. This ecosystem is still emerging. This is the beginning of a conversation, not a stop. And with that, an invitation to you to share your emerging practice with us so we can stay on the learning curve. Based on the many examples we have provided in this ecosystem and the whole report, we have distilled the 4 fundamental principles of Futures Philanthropy that are informed by lived today's philanthropic practice. Addressing root causes, empowering communities, focusing on discovery, cultivating the long view. Addressing root causes, contributing to systemic change. It means working in ecosystems, devoting time and resources to collaboration, which is not always easy, showing humility that we don't have all the answers, not acknowledging and not supporting the status quo. Empowering communities where emphasis is on trust-based, equal partnership and collaboration, not hierarchical relationship. Focusing on discovery, enabling innovation and culture of experimentation that transfers 2 ideas, innovation as an outcome, focusing on science and research, and innovation as a process, cultivating and supporting an internal culture of innovation and experimentation internally. And finally, cultivating the long view, the longue durée. This is perhaps one of the most difficult principles when we look into strategy and into planning. It is not an invitation to abandon where you are today, your obligations, and stop addressing urgent needs, but it's an invitation to think also long-term and to allocate 20% of your budget or your time, which can be already an important step. And a lot of funders started doing exactly that. Where can these principles be applied? They can be applied to strategy development, to designing your programs and instruments, such as grants or operating projects. They can be also applied to future-oriented learning agendas. And here we are consciously moving away from focusing only on impact towards focusing on learning as a process that is oriented towards the past, but also towards the future and what we can learn from that. We have prepared for you also an example of a next-gen foundation to see how these principles manifest in practice. And in the report, you will find many more examples and many more practices. Here's the example of Fantastisch Foundation based in Germany that is focusing on food systems. Philanthropy is defined as not just investing money in a good cause, but about achieving profound systemic change, reducing injustices, and serving a high purpose for the benefit of next generations. These funders see funds, philanthropic funds, as risk capital, follow entrepreneurial approach, and work in true partnership with their grantees. Guided by the principles of building trust and really valuing relations over reports, investing not only in projects, but also in learning and capacity building and well-being of the partners, and also breaking down the established project logic, providing flexible, unrestricted funding based on a strong common vision. Common vision, risk-taking, capacity building, well-being of partners, focusing on the long term. How does it manifest in the practice? How can you implement this in your own context? What does it mean? We have developed 8 indicators of Futures Philanthropy practice, such as strategy, goal orientation, learning agendas, governance and decision-making, resource allocation to foresight. It's not a simplistic exercise inviting you to completely abolish the established philanthropic practice and be only on the right side, but really an invitation into self-reflection. There will be instances where it does make sense to say with robust project management and planning, and in many instances where the cause and effect are not clear, when you need collective intelligence, where applying futures thinking and foresight, having a more agile, iterative strategy is the right approach. In this publication, as you will see, we took much inspiration from nature and ecosystems. Short-termism is one of the biggest problems we're facing today. And even more so, short-termism is actually a human creation. From biology, we know that all living organisms are anticipatory by nature, defined by regeneration, exaptation, and autophasis, meaning that they're capable to self-renew, to embrace future changes, and also self-create and reproduce themselves or parts of the system. So dandelion has become the metaphor of futures philanthropy, regenerative anticipation for the common good. It's a common weed that can be found everywhere, but it is essential for the ecosystem. It nurtures the soil. It can survive in different environments. So just like dandelions, philanthropic organizations can adapt to new environments, help nurture the soil for emerging ideas, and seed alternative futures, contributing to the anticipation for the common good. When we take inspiration from nature, we automatically embrace a long view and an intergenerational approach. We have a long past and a long future ahead of us. On this slide, you can see we're this tiny dot, 8.1 billion people living today in the present. 109 billion people have lived and died in the past 200,000 years of human history. And there are 256 billion people to come, the future generations in the next 200,000 years. Europe's population is projected to decline. We will be 4% by 2100 of the global population. At the same time, Europe still holds a lot of resources and a lot of wealth. And with that comes big responsibility in Europe and the world, and also humility in understanding our role in the fast-changing global context. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to my colleague, Alina, to continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you so much, Nicholas. These are just some of the highlights, and we realize that some of them might resonate with you more than the others. Some might, you can question some of them, or you might be inspired by some of them. And what we wanted to offer is maybe take a minute or so to allow for all of that you have heard to land in you, to digest a little bit before we move on to the next part, where we also wanted to hear from some of our community members that are present in this room. You can also scribble if you want, if there is anything that you have been particularly impressed or something that you found interesting. But let's take 1 minute and then we'll move. As Hannah has just said, that Futures Philanthropy publication is really a polyphony of voices. We would love to use the publication really as an invitation to think of what Futures Philanthropy could be and could do. And this is where we wanted to invite some of our friends and partners to reflect on their aspiration for Futures Philanthropy. And first, I wanted to invite Sine Egede Eskesen, Chief Visionary Officer at Bikuben Foundation.
Thank you very much. What if future philanthropy could contribute to even out the power of asymmetry in our society? Our world consists of power imbalances. This applies to society as a whole, and it applies to the sector of philanthropy. Acknowledging that we as a foundation plays an important part in maintaining power structures, we should work more actively to address this issue and aim to reduce these structural inequalities in society. If we as foundations are to solve complex problems in our society, we depend on working together in collaborations based on equal dialogue. Otherwise, we construct a world far from reality, and we will move further away from the impact we are aiming for. We can ensure more equality by committing ourselves as a foundation to a mission for a longer period of time and not just work in short-term project-based. This can be a reassurance to collaborators. We will stay a partner through difficult times and keep contributing to solutions. This can play a part in a trust-based cooperation. If we are, as foundations, to succeed in even out the power asymmetry in our society, we must start with ourselves as foundations. We must take a more critical look at the role we play as foundations in maintaining old power structures. We are part of it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stina. I wanted to hand over to James McGovern, co-director at European Community Foundation Initiative.
Hi, Alina. Thank you. What if Futures Philanthropy could be embedded in the DNA of philanthropic organizations? I think if we all could apply the self-reflection tool that is in the guide, that would help us enormously in how we can apply futures thinking, how we can learn to use futures literacy and release that imagination and creativity in our foundations. But this has implications for not only who we are, but how we're perceived and what we look like, and importantly, what we do. So in both of those, we have to reassess what is the perception of the organization. It came out in the report that one of the biggest internal risks was conservative boards. So we really have to look at that. We have to look at what the makeup of our own organizations are if we're to have any hope to reimagine a different future. But importantly, in what we do as well, we need to think of the activities, but also the processes, how we involve, for example, young people in decision-making about what will impact more on their lives than our lives, and to apply a more strategic approach to address the root causes rather than the symptoms of issues in society. Community foundations, I think, are particularly well placed to continually build capital for the future. That's financial capital, physical, human, and social capital, the relationships that relate to both this caring society for the future, and people care and love the area and the people that live in their locality. And through that, I think community foundations, and indeed all foundations, have the potential to realize what I learned from Andre Liska when I was at the retreat, a protopian future, somewhere in between a dystopia and a utopia, but a realistic future where we can help shape and have agency to shape that future. And community foundations in particular, I think, have the potential not only to democratize philanthropy, but also to use philanthropy to contribute towards participative democracies. And finally, just going back to nature again, from the dandelion to trees, I'm always minded by the Indian blessing. Blessed are those who plant trees under whose shade they will never sit. And I think we have to always have that in mind. And whilst, yes, we are always occupied with the here and now and day-to-day crisis, don't stop planting trees. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I wanted to hand over to Markus Hiep, a co-founder of Together Foundation. Markus, you definitely were with us.
Yes, I am unmuted. Sorry. What if Futures Philanthropy focus not only on the what, but also on the how? The how of convening, the how of building trust, of centering joy, of enabling innovation and risk-taking, of creating conditions for collective actions. For me, after all my career, reflecting role of philanthropy and Futures Philanthropy, and I like it that we focus on Europe. In Europe, in different versions, we have social welfare states. So whatever the numbers are, 98, 99, 97% of contribution to common good is coming from public. The other big players is the corporate world. So I don't know what it is, 1, 2, or 3% what philanthropy contributes to our societies. And for me, the most powerful thing would be that we really, as it is documented and reported now in the report, we are this one which are make it possible that the existing structures, the existing resources, the existing players in public and in other fields are playing better together. And this means investing in open innovation processes, taking the risk. It's not at all sexy. It's a lot of work. The community foundations know it. Just to organize the better together around a certain topic costs money, resources, knowledge, costs also overcoming our own patterns of egoism. So I would like to see that we use our little philanthropy money much more risk-taking into open innovation processes, which takes our inner into it, and also our boards and whatever, because it's not about us as foundation. It's about the purpose in the center, which we want to change. And I think our biggest role we can have is making the togetherness around the topic much more effective and better. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus. And to close this round, I wanted to invite Rana Kotan, Secretary General of TUSIF, Third Sector Foundation in Turkey. Rana, over to you.
What if Futures Philanthropy could go beyond sophisticated discussions, surpass national boundaries, and overcome language barriers so that collective imagination and futures mindset could reach local contexts? When I read one chapter of this publication, I thought, all right, our individual contexts may differ, but some of the concepts mentioned in the publication, such as treasuring failure as a learning, collaboration, risk-taking, experimentation, these are actually common across countries. So I believe we should find a way to spread the future philanthropy mindset basically to a more national and maybe local level. And I thought of a possibility to bring Futures Philanthropy to our own national context and discuss the topics mentioned in the publication with a group of civil society leaders who could be willing to engage in a discussion using a more future-oriented lens. And I also believe that we can make use of the tools that Nicholas explained earlier that are also explained in the publication. And if there is enough interest, we may also translate the publication into Turkish. But I think the first step would be to bring together a group of interested people, and I think we will do that pretty soon. Thanks for this opportunity, Alina.
Thank you so much, Rana. And well, this is a taste enough for the reflections that can follow, because we want to open the floor. We realize that some of you might not be able to stay for the next 30 minutes. So this is the bonus that comes in already now. And this is your QR code to download the digital copy of the publication. I hope that our dear colleague Barbara will also put it in the chat with the link. And I have just thought now maybe we could have a nice challenge where you share the link with 5 of your friends or colleagues or partners or board members. Make sure that we have this conversation, and we very much invite you to have this conversation internally within your organizations, with those partners that you're working closely with, and share back with us. Share with us your reflections, and we would love to hear from you. At the end of the publication, you'll also see a link to how to get in touch with us and how you might potentially consider partnering on some of the different initiatives that are part of this effort. And we wanted to thank you for the generosity of your time for joining us today for this round. A very big thank you to Hannah and Niklas for presenting the publication, for Delphine and Dasha for being such inspiring leaders, and for the very dear community of Futures Philanthropy avant-gardeners who have been with us all along the way in creating this publication. Now, if you would love to leave an impression, and I see that some of the impressions are popping in the chat already, thank you so much. If there is a thought that you would love to share before you leave, it is an invitation to do so now. And then we hope that some of you will stay to share what you're taking away from this conversation. Thank you so much.
I'll leave, but thank you very much. Bye-bye. All the best.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. Let's give it a minute or so for everyone who would need to go to leave, and then we are very excited to see some of you staying with us here in this virtual room for a fireside conversation now. So the nice part is only starting. All right. Thank you so much for staying longer. It is my joy to hand it over to Niklas and Hannah, who will be hosting you for this fireside chat conversation. Unfortunately, I myself will need to log off to pick up my kit, but I am wishing you a wonderful conversation in the next 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina, so much for the beautiful, beautiful hosting of our session today. Thank you for your energy. And welcome to everyone who is staying longer with us. As Alina was saying, it's a fireside conversation, so it's just a full circle. And Niklas and myself will be happy to host this conversation and to hear your thoughts, your reflections, what sits with you in this moment where you have gone through the presentation.
Incredible to see that we still have 24 participants on the call. I was nervous that it was just going to be you and myself, Hannah. But as we are going into a space where you can be vulnerable and share your questions and considerations, we will also stop the recording now.